There is a fruit sitting in health food stores right now selling for almost $20 a bag. People are paying that much for a handful of dried berries because of what it does for their eyes. And here is the part that will annoy you a little. You can grow an endless supply of it in a pot on your balcony for less than the price of one bag. No greenhouse. No fancy soil. No special skill. Just one small plant that most gardeners walk right past at the nursery because it looks completely unremarkable. Stay with me because the way this fruit protects your eyesight is stranger and more powerful than anything I expected when I first researched it. Hey friends, welcome back to Gentle Greens, where we make growing your own food simple and affordable. If you are new here, hello, glad you found us. And if you have been here before, welcome back. Today we are talking about a fruit that deserves way more attention than it gets, especially if you spend hours a day staring at a screen like most of us do. If you find this useful, tap that like button. It costs nothing and it genuinely helps this channel reach more gardeners. Now let us get into it. So what is this fruit? It is the goji berry, sometimes called the wolfberry. Now before you scroll away thinking you have heard this one before, hang on, because most of what gets said about goji berries online barely scratches the surface, and a lot of it is honestly wrong. Most people think of goji berries as a trendy smoothie add-in, something you buy in a plastic pouch from a health store, already dried, already expensive, already sitting on a shelf next to other superfoods with big price tags. What they do not realize is that this plant grows like a weed once it is established, tolerates neglect better than almost anything else in your garden, and produces fruit that is loaded with two very specific compounds your eyes are begging for. Those compounds are called zeaxanthin and lutein. Your eyes actually store these two nutrients directly in the macula, which is the part of your eye responsible for sharp central vision, the part you use for reading, recognizing faces, and seeing fine detail. Think of it like this. Your macula is basically wearing built-in sunglasses made from these pigments, and they filter out the harsh blue light that damages your retina over time. Screens, sunlight, and even LED lighting all pump out that blue light every single day, hour after hour, and most of us barely think twice about it. Most fruits contain small traces of these compounds. Goji berries contain some of the highest levels found in any food on the planet, more than spinach, more than kale, more than carrots that everyone always talks about for eye health. Let us slow down here for a second because this part actually matters and most videos skip right past it. Lutein and zeaxanthin are not identical twins. They are more like siblings with slightly different jobs. Lutein tends to sit more toward the outer edge of the macula, while zeaxanthin concentrates right in the center, in the exact spot responsible for your sharpest vision. Together they act almost like a natural pair of polarized sunglasses built into your eye, absorbing high-energy blue light before it reaches the more delicate structures behind it. Here is why that matters so much right now. Decades ago, most people were not staring at glowing screens for 6, 8, sometimes 12 hours a day. Blue light exposure was mostly limited to sunlight. Now we carry a blue light source in our pocket, another one on our desk, and often another one on the wall of our living room. Your eyes were simply not built for this level of exposure, and the compounds that protect the macula slowly deplete over time, if you are not replenishing them through food. The interesting part is that your body cannot produce lutein or zeaxanthin on its own. You have to get them from what you eat. That is what makes food sources so important compared to relying purely on supplements, and it is exactly why growing something like goji in your own backyard is such a practical advantage. Fresh, homegrown fruit tends to retain more of these delicate compounds than something that has been processed, dried, shipped, and sitting on a shelf for months before it reaches you. Here is where it gets good for those of us who do not want to spend a fortune keeping a garden alive. Goji plants are shrubs, and once they settle in, they come back year after year without you needing to replant anything. One plant can produce for well over a decade. You buy it once and it keeps paying you back every single season, unlike a lot of trendy fruits that need constant babying just to survive a single year. It also does not demand much. This shrub originally grew in rocky, dry regions with poor soil, which means it actually performs worse if you baby it with rich soil and constant watering. Give it average soil, a sunny spot, and water only when the topsoil feels dry, and it will reward you with far more fruit than a plant that requires constant attention. Another thing that surprises people is how well it tolerates containers. If you live in an apartment with just a balcony, or you rent and cannot dig up a yard, you can grow a goji plant in a pot roughly the size of a 5-gallon bucket and still get a solid harvest once it matures. I have heard from viewers on this channel before who assumed fruit growing was simply off the table for them because they did not own land, and this is exactly the kind of plant that proves that assumption wrong. Quick pause here. If this is helping you see gardening differently, drop a comment telling me where you plan on growing yours, a balcony, a backyard, a windowsill, wherever it is. I read every comment, and it helps me know what to cover next. And if you have not already, hit subscribe so you do not miss the rest of this series, because next week we are covering another plant most people completely overlook. Let us get practical. Here is how you get this into your garden the right way. Starting point. You can grow goji from seed, but honestly, that route tests your patience because germination can be slow and uneven. The faster and more reliable path is buying a young plant or a cutting from a nursery or online seller. Within the first year you will already see some fruit, and by year 2 or 3 you are looking at a proper harvest. Sunlight. This plant wants full sun. Aim for at least 6 hours a day. Less sun means fewer berries and a leggy, weak-looking shrub that puts more energy into stretching toward light than producing fruit. Soil. Do not overthink this part. Regular garden soil with decent drainage is enough. If your soil holds water like a sponge after rain, mix in some sand or gravel so the roots do not sit soggy, because that is the one thing that actually kills this plant faster than anything else. Watering. Water it well when you first plant it to help the roots establish. After that, let the soil dry out between waterings. Overwatering is the #1 mistake people make with this shrub. It genuinely prefers to be a little neglected, which honestly makes it one of the more forgiving plants for anyone who tends to forget watering schedules. Support. Goji plants grow long, somewhat floppy branches, kind of like a loose vine crossed with a bush. A simple stake or small trellis keeps it tidy and makes harvesting far easier. Without support it tends to sprawl across the ground, which invites pests and rot. Pruning. Once a year trim back the oldest and weakest branches. This encourages fresh growth, and fresh growth is where the most fruit tends to appear. Do not be afraid to cut it back fairly hard. This plant bounces back quickly and often responds to a firm pruning with a noticeably fuller shape the following season. Pests. One of the reasons budget gardeners love it, pests mostly leave it alone. Occasionally aphids show up on new growth, but a simple spray of water and mild soap handles that without needing any expensive treatment. Companion planting. Here is something rarely mentioned. Goji does well when planted near herbs like rosemary or thyme, since both prefer similar dry conditions, and the strong scent of these herbs can help deter certain pests from finding your goji in the first place. Avoid planting it right next to thirsty vegetables like lettuce or cucumbers, because their constant watering needs will work against the drier conditions your goji actually prefers. If you are working with a small space, tucking a goji shrub along a sunny fence line, with herbs planted at its base, is a smart way to use every inch without the two competing for water. Let us talk about timing and climate for a moment because this trips people up more than almost anything else. Goji is genuinely one of the more forgiving plants when it comes to climate range. It handles cold winters surprisingly well, tolerating temperatures well below freezing once it is established, and it also holds up fine in hot summers as long as it gets consistent sunlight. The best window for planting is either early spring, right after the last frost has passed, or early autumn, while the soil is still warm enough for roots to settle in before winter arrives. If you live somewhere with harsh winters, a first-year plant benefits from a simple layer of mulch around the base once temperatures start dropping. This is not required for older, established shrubs, but for that first winter it gives the roots a bit of extra protection while they are still settling in. A few quick questions people often ask, so let us knock these out together. Is it invasive? In most home garden settings, no, especially if you keep up with that yearly pruning we talked about earlier. Can it handle partial shade? It can survive with a bit less than 6 hours of sun, but expect a noticeably smaller harvest. Is it safe around kids and pets? The ripe berries are safe to eat, but unripe or green berries should not be eaten. So it is worth keeping an eye on young children near the plant. How long until a real harvest? Most people see a small amount of fruit within the first year, but the shrub really hits its stride around year 2 or 3, once the root system and branch structure are fully established. While we are here, let us clear up a few things people get wrong about other fruits marketed for eye health, because the marketing world loves a good buzzword. Blueberries get praised constantly for eye health, and they do offer antioxidants that support overall eye tissue, but they contain very little lutein or zeaxanthin compared to goji. Bilberry is another one that gets thrown around a lot, largely based on old stories about pilots eating it before night missions. Modern research has not strongly backed that particular legend. And of course carrots. Carrots support night vision through vitamin A, which is genuinely useful, but they offer very little in terms of long-term protection against light exposure and age-related decline. Pomegranate and kiwi both offer some benefit too. More general antioxidant support, rather than the targeted macula protection goji provides. None of this means avoid these fruits, they are all worth having, but for macula protection specifically, goji stands in a category of its own among fruits you can grow at home. Here is something that genuinely surprised me when researching this. Most articles tell you to eat the berries dried or blended into a smoothie. But the leaves of this plant are also edible, and in parts of Asia they are used just as often as the berries themselves, cooked lightly like spinach. They carry a milder dose of the same eye-protecting compounds. So this is not just a fruit plant, it is essentially two food sources growing from one shrub, and almost nobody in Western gardening circles talks about that part. Another detail worth knowing, the flowers that appear before the fruit are a soft purple color, and they are genuinely one of the more attractive additions to a small garden. I want to share something that happened after I first planted mine. A neighbor stopped by, saw the shrub, and asked if it was some kind of ornamental plant because of the flowers. When I told her it produced fruit that people pay nearly $20 a bag for online, she genuinely laughed in disbelief. A few months later she asked for a cutting of her own. This plant does not look impressive at first glance, and that is exactly why it flies under the radar while quietly doing more than almost anything else in a small garden. The berries turn a bright orange-red when ready. Here is a tip almost nobody mentions. Do not pick them straight off the branch with your fingers if you plan to dry them, because the fresh berries bruise easily. Instead, gently shake the branch over a clean sheet or tray and let the ripe ones fall. Once harvested, you have a few simple options. If you want to dry them, spread the berries out somewhere warm and well ventilated, out of direct sunlight, and let them shrink down naturally over a week or two. Freezing is another easy option. Spread the fresh berries on a tray, freeze them individually so they do not clump together, then transfer them into a container or bag. As for using them, they work well tossed straight into a smoothie, sprinkled over oatmeal, or steeped in hot water for a mild, slightly tangy tea. Dried goji berries also work beautifully in homemade trail mix, paired with nuts and a bit of dark chocolate. They blend nicely into overnight oats too. Added the night before so they soften slightly by morning. Let us talk numbers for a second because budget gardeners like numbers that actually make sense. A single bag of dried goji berries at a health store can run you $12 to $20 for roughly half a pound. A young goji plant from a nursery typically costs $10 to $20 one time, and once mature, a single healthy shrub can produce several pounds of fruit each season. Do that math over 5 or 10 years and the savings become obvious. It is worth connecting this back to daily habits too, because a fruit alone is not doing all the work by itself. Eye doctors often mention something called the 20-20-20 rule for anyone who spends long hours in front of a screen, simply meaning every 20 minutes, look at something roughly 20 feet away for about 20 seconds. Pairing a habit like that with a diet that includes something like goji is exactly the kind of small, unglamorous combination that adds up to real protection over the years. I want to be honest with you here because that matters more to me than views. No single fruit is going to fix serious vision problems or replace a visit to an eye doctor. What goji berries offer is support. A natural boost of nutrients your eyes use every single day to protect themselves from slow, gradual damage. Small, consistent habits are what actually add up over the years, and growing your own supply just makes that habit easier and far cheaper to keep. So there you have it, one small, tough, unbothered little shrub that most gardeners walk past without a second glance, quietly doing more for your eyesight than half the trendy supplements sold online. And it costs you almost nothing to grow once it is established. If you enjoyed this and learned something new, that like button really does help this channel grow. Drop a comment and let me know if you already grow goji berries, or if this is the first time you are hearing about them properly. And if you want more simple, budget-friendly tips like this delivered straight to your feed, subscribe to Gentle Greens and turn on notifications so you never miss the next one. Thanks for spending this time with me today. Go get your hands in the soil and I will see you in the next video.